So today we are in UK, or at least the vibes are here. Callum
You
Restrick and Martin Winston, two of the most or almost or but well-known coaches from UK. Nice to meet you guys.
How you doing, buddy?
And as we start, we want to speak about biggest bodybuilding mistakes, and plenty of people make them, especially with the beginners ones, but not only. And when it comes to coaching, you both guys have pros, you have amateurs. Which are harder actually to coach and why? And let's start with Callum.
Well, I think you're gonna get two sides of the equation. You're gonna get you're gonna get experienced athletes that come to you that maybe are more resistant to change in areas that they need to change, but potentially won't admit they need to. So, like if they're comfortable with doing certain things or approaching things in a certain way because they've always done it, then change is uncomfortable to a lot of people in that degree, and they won't want to change variables that you know they need to. But once you've built trust there, then it kind of slots back into place. And then from a new from a new athlete perspective, in terms of a first timer or someone that is very new to the sport, there's just a certain level of naivety, I think, that comes with that. And it's then the coach's responsibility to kind of just make them aware of the things that go on in this process and show them the way. So I think I think Mark will say the same thing. Like, you're going to get some pros that are a nightmare to work with, and you're going to get some amateurs that are a nightmare to work with. But it all comes down to, hopefully, if they give you enough time from a coaching standpoint and they can really buy in and you can build rapport, then things do start slotting into place. But there's definitely been a challenge or two along the way that you have to face.
Do you
Yeah,
guys?
I
Yeah,
think it
go.
comes down to being coachable at the end of the day. No matter whether you're a first timer or whether you're a pro on the way to the Olympia, you have to be coachable. Like Callum said, I think the adjustment to change is a massive thing. Where when you're taking a first timer, an athlete who's new to the scene and new to bodybuilding, they're keen, they're eager, they will do anything that you tell them to do. And that becomes sort of like the easy part. The harder part, I think, then transitions across to whether they're a pro or a high level amateur. Is once you have a conversation with them, you get a vibe of where their mindset is. If they're in the right place to accept change, to be able to put their physique in a better position. If they're quite determined on, right, this is the way that I do things, I just want you to coach me and oversee me, then realistically, is that the client that you want on board? I think it's one of those things that, to answer the question, I don't think there's a direct correlation between the two in regards to, you can't say one over the other. I think it's the actual person itself in how they are as a person.
Yeah.
Do you guys often meet with people like who are so stuck in their way that they come to you, you give them a plan, and week passes, like exactly 7 days pass, and they're like heading more and trying to convince you to go back to their patterns that they used to do, just to like have a yes man or someone to actually pat them on the back.
Exactly that. I think, like you said there, being a yes man as a coach, you have to be supportive, always supportive as a coach, but you need to be the one taking the overarching control pretty much over everything. There's still got to be some sustainability in regards to, obviously, nutrition, training, where obviously you got to have a little bit of back and forth with a client to make sure that they're in a position where they can commit to it from an enjoyable process. Like if you set something up for someone and they're like, I'm really not feeling this vibe, then again, it's, are they the right client? Because again, one, they're not adapting for change. But if you're working with someone and trying to bring that out of them and they're still not accepting that, that's when it's time to look at the client and think, you know what, is this the best thing for us?
Which is actually harder to make, and which do you find harder as a coach to prep someone and to get them results? Because we know that there is a saying that off season builds us champions, and off season is actually the place where we are the longest in, not the prep. So where do you find more problems, in the off season or in the prep? Callum.
Um, I think like an interesting one to discuss there is a lot of a commonality that you're going to see a problem with in the off season is, and this is, you might have got an athlete that comes to you who, could be amateur or pro, but they're they're getting feedback that they need to put tissue on in certain areas, they need to get bigger. But you get a lot of people who do struggle to push in the off season and do struggle to spend time at higher body weights and do struggle to spend time at a really high threshold of food. They don't like eating, they don't like force feeding. And you do tend to find that, we see it on social media all the time where people are like, oh, I'm gonna run an 8 week tidy up now, or I'm gonna run a little recomp in the off season. And 9 times out of 10, like, they might not even be out of shape. That it just might just be because they can't hack keeping food that high for that long. And in certain cases, Martin would have seen this, you would have seen this as well. Like, sometimes you just need to get your head down and just try and persist, because your body needs to be there to drive the muscle on it needs. And yeah, you're always going to get times where you've just cooked the phase that you're in and you need to reset. But one thing I think a limitation, or something that athletes struggle with in the off season, is just pushing the envelope for a long enough period of time to allow the changes in the off season to actually happen in the first place. And food is, when I remember when I used to be heavy, I'm pretty sure that I haven't had an appetite since I stopped bodybuilding. So I'm pretty sure that last off season push I did pretty much ruined my appetite for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But like little things, like if I like open a tub of cream rice now, like it makes me feel sick just smelling cream of rice, because I used to eat so much cream rice when I was pushing food hard. And it was just a point where it's like, that's almost why, it's pretty not practical having to eat that much and prepare that much food daily when you're busy. But that was one of the big elements that almost made me fall out of love with it, because it just became so monotonous to, like, I've got to get up. It takes me half an hour to eat my first meal. And then, right, I've got to eat in 2 hours. It's going to take me another half an hour to eat my second meal. But there's a lot of people that just need to do that if they want to be better bodybuilders.
Yeah, and it's pushing past that comfort zone that we all get to. We all get to that point in an off season, and we're like, I'm feeling it. But how long do you last at that point before you then come back down? It's spending time in that uncomfortable position, very much like what you would do in a prep scenario. You're going to be uncomfortable for potentially the last 6 to 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is of your prep. It's not going to, for some, it's not fun. You need to flip that around and push that in your off season. You need to spend time in that big surplus. You need to spend time uncomfortable. You need to spend time awake for 16 hours a day to eat for some of my guys.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, like Cal said, it is a full-time job being an off-season, more so super heavyweight bodybuilder, pro bodybuilder to a certain degree, when you're eating that amount of food, just to spend time in the kitchen preparing it, unless you're fortunate to have all your food cooked for you and delivered to you. But I see it. I've got guys that wake up at 5, start their day eating then, and they'll take their last meal to bed and have it at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Who's prepared to do that? Are you prepared to do that day in and day out for the next 2, 3 months, pushing yourself? And that's where I think the real sort of characters of bodybuilding can develop and push themselves. Everyone will say they've got a favorite, whether it's prep or an off season, which is cool. But how many people do actually spend that time, especially if you're looking at more than just like one off season? If you know that you need to be, say, if you've taken your pro card and you need a good few seasons to push, like, that's going to be monotonous. That's going to be tiring, because you're literally just aiming for that time where you've built enough tissue where you can then step on stage. It may take 2, 3, 4 years. That's the hardship, because we all enjoy being on stage. We enjoy that part of it. And not being able to do that, and someone saying to you, if your coach is telling you that we need to spend time here now just building, how long are they going to commit to that? And at 100%, it's going to be tough. And I think in my observation, I think pushing an off season is always going to be much harder than pushing a prep.
Guys, I think that you mentioned really, really, I don't know if it was by a mistake or just you have done it, because you have mentioned a really, really important thing: social media. It fucked everything up. Everything up. It's the truth. people are making those, clean up faces. People are staying with the striated glutes for the whole year only to show off on the social media that they are in shape. In the end, when they are prepping again, it's the same thing. If you want to change, you have to do something different. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. If you have always been leanish, so to speak, on the off season, and it had brought you shit results. Let's be real. It has brought you nothing. What do you have to do? You have to get fluffy, and it's not sexy. It's not, people are not going to give you lots of hearts. That's why we have reels. You can speak, you can have your mouth. You don't need to show your body and still get loads of views. But people don't understand it. And social media, that's the biggest of bodybuilding mistakes, and focusing on it, and as well comparing yourself to others. I'm never going to be a Phil Heath. Callum is not going to be I don't know, Dexter Jackson, or Martin is not going to be a CBAM. But we still have our goals, and people see the end results, which is basically 5 minutes on the stage. And that's what I think is killing the sport, the social media, and killing the progress. And many, many people are staying the same because they are just way too focused on the social media aspect.
100%. And I do get it with some guys. Obviously, they have sponsorships, they have to upkeep and all this. They have to be present. But realistically, if you want to make that process, you need to step away from that. Remind yourself why you're doing this and where you started in the sport. Back in the day when there was no social media, what were we doing? Turning up, training, lifting weight, eating food, and nobody knew about it. Back when I competed, like, there was no, sound freaking old now, but there was no, I think Facebook had just started.
But do they really have to? Because nowadays, sponsors don't care what place do you take on the amateur show or the amateur Olympia. Are you the second vice champion of the world? They don't give a flying, They just want you to sell the products. If the product is selling, you can look like, I don't know, Michelin guy in the off season. You are still going to be worth way more than the guy who is lean, shredded, and so on, because they don't care. All they care about, and everyone cares about, is you being worth the money and your head. That's why, for example, Sam Sulek, that's why he is so, so popular. When he gets fluffy, he doesn't give a when he trains, when his technique fails. And that's the second thing, which I'd like you guys to speak about. Don't you think that we have all of this, optimal ways of training, which is, of course, great. But since it came, we are lacking the intensity. No matter what you do, if you do it with one hand, both hands, if you do it with a bar on your back or on the hack squat, I don't see any more blood from your nose. I don't see any more people coughing, screaming. And it's not like screaming. It's just, it's the pain of the work. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not and want to speak about the intensity of training, which I think is most important in the bodybuilding.
Go, Cal.
Yeah, like I guess my introduction into that's quite an interesting one, because like I remember in like 2013, 2014, when Michael Goulden and the RTS crowd that are based in London first started becoming like more well known. Like I was introduced to it from a colleague that used to work with us in the Muscle Mentors back then. And Michael Goulden came to M10 a couple of times to see us, and he ran workshops, and we went to his courses. And there's a guy that runs RTS, which stands for Resistance Training Specialist, over in America, called Tom Purvis. And he was basically the one that Hypertrophy Coach learned off, Coach Kassem learned off, BPAC learned off, all these guys that started to, were like the founding fathers, shall we say, of execution on social media. It's all RTS stuff. It's moment arms, it's force, it's it's basically like maths for exercise. And you can get really, really nerdy with it, like to the point where they've got like fucking suitcase carrier scales measuring cable stacks and stuff like this. And like you can get really nerdy with it. And I think the concept of Like the basis of RTS is really useful because you need to grasp it to train smart. But the interesting thing is, like, I didn't really know the technicalities of the theory when I first went, but I remember when we were doing all the exercises and we were going through these drills, because I'd trained for a long period of time and I was just a bit of a meathead, I was kind of doing things without knowing why I was doing them, but I was doing them already for most of the time because it just felt better. And a lot of bodybuilders back in the day, or shall I say bodybuilders that maybe haven't gone down that route, that are, what we'd refer to as like the people that are the old school guys instead of new school guys, whatever you want to call it. Like a lot of those guys that have made loads of progress, and a lot of the pros that we see that were before the time of social media, 9 times out of 10, yeah, some of the stuff might technically be wrong if you look at that from a fucking maths perspective, from an RTS perspective, which is all great, but they've tried and tested things in a way where they end up just doing what works and feels best anyway. So a lot of those boxes are already being ticked. But with anything, stuff that looks sciencey and fancy sells, and it's big and it gets likes on social media and people comment and people share it. And as with anything, things just get taken to the nth degree if you give them an opportunity. So I think this whole notion of intensity being lost, I think a lot of the, when Joe Bennett started posting stuff on his Instagram and that, the first tricep extension with the dual cables came out and stuff like that, because that was glorified, Hunter started doing it. And then all these guys are doing it at the top level. It's like, fuck, like this is a secret. So a lot of these younger guys just see that as gospel now. It's like, oh, I'm just going to do this stuff and spend an hour on this cable stack. Yeah. But in reality, a lot of those, if you look at BPAC, like the dude was fucking deadlifting like 800, 900 pounds when he was fucking 20 years old, when he was younger than that. He was squatting hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And the tissue that you see on his frame was not built by spending time on a cable stack, but it's refined over time. And maybe he stays injury free and has more longevity because he started doing that. But a lot of the tissue that's there, if you go back and see old training videos, the bloke's a fucking savage.
Yeah. And I think you said there the word refinement. And I think that's where the guys that we're seeing on social media, they're not at that point where they need the refinement. They need the tissue. And that's where that big chunk, the 5-10 years, is missing before we see these guys that are going into this motion on social media that are getting picked apart. They're training, they're enjoying it, but they're not in a position where realistically they should be doing that point. I always say the bread and butter, shifting that weight, getting in the gym and just really loading yourself and getting to a point where muscularity is being developed over a period of time. And then, like you said, refinement is the one that potentially, and injury free, you mentioned that as well, Callum. Like, there's only so long, we were speaking before, it's like the longevity in the sport. There's the aspect of that we need to look at. We can't load our frames and bodies with the amount of weight that we did when we were 20s, We're 30 approaching 40. Are we going to be lifting and shifting the same weight with the same authority, the same technique? Something's got to give. So I think overall, my sort of thing is, yes, there is a lot of intensity lacking, but not from the more developed and the guys that essentially the more experienced guys, shall we say. I think it's the guys that need to spend time in the gym that need to really sort of focus on that intensity and the weight that they're shifting, and maybe not so you've always got to focus on form but like revert back to that old sort of grip it and rip it sort of methodology to a certain degree, and it's going to build your tissue. And I think that's what's missing. It's that big chunk of trying to obtain that tissue on a physique from the younger boys that we're seeing on social media.
Yeah, but as you spoke about cables, for example, people see, as you said, those extensions, and they see the first 3 movements. They see like 1, 2, 3, and they skip the whole video. They don't see that, for example, Hunter, Kuba, or Justin Shaya, they are literally, when they are doing the last rep, they are shaking, they are screaming, they are breathing hard. That's what the part that matters. Doesn't matter if you do it with the one hand. It's, as I said, it is important, as you guys mentioned, to have a good form, to work the muscle that you want to work. But as well the intensity, those last reps, which are the grinders, those who are, which really matter, are forgotten because people have the short memory, and that's the worst thing. For example, there is a huge debate nowadays in Poland. Does do pull-ups should bodybuilders do pull-ups? Should bodybuilders do squats? Should bodybuilders do rows? If they want to, okay, there are more optimal ways, so to speak. But what matters is intensity. There are so many schools, as you spoke, guys. There is HIT, there is Jay Scuttlers, yeah, and there is Branch Warrens. Every each is different, and every each has brought the muscle. Every each has brought their physique to a higher standard. One thing that is same with every each technique that worked because every each worked is intensity. They have pushed themselves beyond the limit, as you said, with the food, with the training, and now we got to mention the most important, which is for most but shouldn't be, pushing the gear. When do you think guys should even consider or even have a look? Because we're living now in the society of TikTok. We know that TikTok is popular. We see it everywhere. And we see 15 years old kids speaking about trend and so on. When I was 50, I remember the first time when I heard about steroids, I was 21. And perhaps some people are not going to, believe that. My first cycle was when I was 23. When the first time I heard about it, it was 21 when I was still training the martial arts. And I heard about Dorian Yates because I was taking his pre-workout. And I thought that, this pre-workout, this Nox pump is going to make me a Dorian Yates. And then some guy said from the gym, no, he's taking the this and that. And I'm like, and I was so pissed about it when I found out on the first, I was so pissed about it. Then, of course, I had to accept it. But what is even, I don't want to say about the, like when you are 21, you should start 23 or something. But what should be your overall bodybuilding experience before you even have it in mind, Callum?
Like I saw, I don't know where it was the other day. I saw, don't know where it was, but basically they'd done a survey of like 10,000 people in the UK, and it was between the ages of 18 and 30, 1 in 10 males in the UK were using steroids. It's like 1/10 of the population that they'd done of however many thousand people. It seems it's an insane amount if you think about it in terms of like our industry is like a pretty small niche in the grand scheme, right? Bodybuilding in general. But if you look at that going out into the wider public, like use in general is becoming more and more prominent. And I think, it's not his fault, or if anything, people like Jordan have done worlds of good in the industry because he's made people talk about it and he's made people discuss it, which was key. But I think I remember when I first got social media, like in 2014, like people wouldn't talk about steroids online because it was like almost like a taboo thing. Like they wouldn't talk about gear. And then once Jordan brought his website out and people started posting more, not on private forums, but like publicly on social media, it then became the norm. And it's like, oh, people want to talk about it because people want to discuss it. People want to be seen doing it because then maybe they can take clients on themselves and teach them. But I think from that, it's because it's so normalized now and so readily available that it's not really a thing anymore. Like an 18-year-old taking X amount of milligrams a week is like,
yeah,
it's just another, it's just, you see it all the time now. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think to answer your question, obviously that when we as coaches have a potential natural athlete, shall we say, that then we're thinking or they're thinking that right at some point you're going to transition across onto cycle, yes, you could put an age on it, but then you could have like the next Olympia winner at 2021 sitting in front of you, and they're sort of saying to you like, I'm interested to go on cycle, and you can see where they are, and you're going to have conversations, obviously safe conversations in regards to obviously where the health markers are, etc. They need to realize and understand obviously the dangers and longevity in this sport and what the implications are. You're always going to be, well, I certainly will be in the sort of pretense of trying to keep someone off cycle as long as possible and try and maximize every single avenue before they even think about it. You know, like couple of seasons, you know, of growing, couple of seasons of competing, pushing yourself, training hard, exhausting all avenues before you're even thinking about that conversation of, right, this is where we're going. And then it's the question of, right, how much do I do? And then like I've seen guys on silly cycles as their first cycle, like scary silly cycles, and it's like, who has told you to take this? And the conversation comes, oh, I've seen it on social media, you know, and it's not they've not been given professional advice in regards to, right, okay, what health markers do we need to look for, how much should I safely take because of what my bloods are telling me. They're actually picking up something that they've seen on social media and then taking that straight. We're talking like 1.5 to 2 grams of gear from an 18-year-old, you know, 600 meg of tren, because they've seen it on social media, which again becomes that like that sort of necessary evil of social media. It's great for one thing, exposing it and talking about it, but then once you get like a 16, 17, 18-year-old seeing that, they're like, I want to look like this dude, I'm going to take this because I've seen it on social media and so-and-so's taking it. You know, they've got no one in their life to be able to control that. You know, they're just going to the man behind the gym who just wants to sell them some gear to make some money.
Yeah.
You know, so we've all seen it. I've seen it in gyms that I've been in, you know, and there's been no direction. And I've seen what happens following that. You know, I've seen the detrimental effects of their blood works and potential impotency and things like this. It's hard to take on board because these guys are now affected their whole life because of a decision they've made because they've seen something on social media. You know, it's tough.
What I have seen are two things. You know, first of all, as you said, there is always some guy that comes to you and he says he speaks about his cycle and so on, and you're asking him who gave you this information. He's like answering with my friend, and suddenly it comes that this friend is the one that sold them to, you know, and this friend is like a friendly coach to everyone on the gym. And what people then don't take into consideration is the second most important thing is in bodybuilding, which I think is your head. People don't get it. If that is not working, nothing is going to work. If you have doubts in yourself, if you don't believe in what your worth and much more, the gear is going to just put you into worse hole than you have been. And you guys have probably, I mean, you have surely seen and dealt with many clients who have really fucked up their brains because they had no idea what they are doing with their hormonals, and they think only about, you know, estradiol, prolactin, and progesterone. There is still dopamine, there is serotonin, and so on. There are so many things going into that. Not to speak about, you know, cholesterol and so on, because those are almost always when someone comes, their cholesterol HDL is like 0.3 or something, if that. So when it comes to the psychological things, which I think we should mention as the last one, but most important one, which do you think people struggle with most?
I think once you become a bodybuilder, you almost get trapped in the world. It's very hard to detach yourself, I think, from that. Like myself, Callum, we've competed, we're now coaching, so we're still going to be involved for God knows how long, God forbid, you know. But once you become a bodybuilder and you are in that mindset that you want to be the best version of yourself, you're locked in. And up there, we all know that bodybuilders ain't wired up right because we're doing stuff that we're taking our bodies to the extreme one way or the other, you know. People looking in at bodybuilding are like, why the f are you doing that, you know? And we can't give them really an accent because we want to be the best one. They don't see the sort of determination and drive that an individual a bodybuilder has, to get absolutely skinlessly peeled on stage in a thong to show their physique off for 5 minutes and then walk off. You tell someone that you've just dieted for 15, 20 weeks to show that, do that, they're going to look at you and be like, why the hell are you, why do you do this? You know, so I think we can all agree that we're all a little bit sort of hooked.
Yes,
on
sorry
it.
for before I give the voice to Callum. People think that we are healthy because we look good. There is nothing healthy about having 3% of body fat in your body, in your you know, as your body is.
Yeah.
I am I'm lucky. I myself am lucky that I have held for this long, this low body fat, and I have still the perfect blood work. But how many of Davids are there? How many people are actually lucky? Because I'm not a brilliant scientist who takes, like, you know, magical Arjuna and bergamot to overcome those HDL symptoms. I'm just lucky that my mother and my father gave me this genetics, being, you know, kind of I don't have this much of side effects as most would have running as much as I do. And people don't take it into consideration. They think that you have six pack, then you look hot, and that your mouth is, you know, sunk, that you are healthy. You are not healthy. Your bodybuilding is not healthy. And if someone, it's like healthy cycle. What? You can do it healthier. You can't do it 100% healthy.
I think
What's the psychological effects?
Yeah, it's like the there was an article a couple of years ago that was done by some sports medicine doctor about like the disparity in the public eye that aren't in the industry of like the health and fitness industry, and it basically had the word health with like crossed out with a red X because it was like just it was the fitness industry because you know once you get to like if there's a side of this industry if you look at like the sporting side of endurance sport. So if you look at like a rower or a, you know, for I'd imagine most CrossFitters, I imagine some of them are juicing, but most CrossFitters, most you know, athletes working in these endurance sports, runners, whatever it might be, like that there is probably a swimmer, for example, that there probably is legitimately like a fit and healthy individual because cardiovascularly they're in a good place, they've got low body fat, they probably look after their nutrition. But the more you get to the extreme of not the engine of the athlete, just the look of the athlete, the worse it gets in terms of health. So like what they would see as like you could get a fucking road cyclist who looks like total shit, that's got very little muscle, that's like skinny fat. But this dude is the healthiest guy that out of the bunch because the nine guys with massive six packs and that are jacked, although the public eye would say, "Oh, look at him, he's fit and healthy." You know, he could be the worst off in terms of his actual health and longevity in terms of what's going to happen in later life. So, yeah, I think that is smoke and mirrors, isn't it, in the fitness industry?
Fitness. We're supposed to be
yeah, yeah, fitness.
fitness.
Exactly.
When are you guys having those seminars? Because you are planning the second part. I think it's second seminar you're having now.
Yes, 3rd of February, UK one. We have one in November. It's very good. The coach approach, myself, Callum, and Tom Haynes from Evolution Training. We have set this coach approach for other coaches to learn and develop their skill sets, I think, and just prioritize our guidance in regards to that, where we've been able to take our coaching businesses and hopefully help individuals escalate and elevate their coaching business and their knowledge to the same sort of level. You know, the first one was very successful. We've got a second one coming up in, where is it again, Cal? Colville.
Colville, yeah, it's like just north of Birmingham.
How can one sign up?
I've got a link in my bio. You can purchase a ticket through there. We are actually giving away a free ticket for 2 free tickets at the moment. So depending on
because one is for me.
depending on when this one goes out, they may not catch us, but yeah, you can catch in my bio, Martin Winston. We can cater, I think it's 50, 60 guys. We got 50, 60 guys, I think, tickets.
Yeah.
that are up for sale. We are looking at expanding. Potentially, there's going to be one in Dubai, maybe one in Europe as well. But that's all sort of in the pipeline. But again, it's something for us, and I think Cal can sort of join me in the fact that it was a very enjoyable day last time we've done it. It was the feedback that we had was very good, and we're pretty much just repeating the same one because it was that sort of well sort of taken on board. So yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be exciting to see more new faces.
If anyone would like to join or sign up, then just message Martin or go to his Instagram or to Callum's Instagram. It's always probably there. And thank you guys for having your time. And if anyone wants to ask us anything, because I don't think that's the only part which we are going to record. And if you enjoyed it, leave a comment down below and just leave a question, which subject you would like us to discuss about. Thank you guys for taking your time, and we're going to speak to you soon. Leave subscribe, like button, comments, everything, all of those good things, and follow Instagrams of Callum and Martin. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Cheers,